welcome to everybody to this Friday webinar series of eGrow Foundation. As you are aware, every Friday evening, we are bringing the best minds from across the world to speak to us on contemporary issues. It's just not the present people in the webinar. It is, we do the recording and we put it on our website, and also we send these recordings to officials to whom it matters. These are all policy oriented, and therefore all the webinars that we are conducting are from the angle of policy making, also providing inputs to policy makers, and therefore they are shared extensively with the policy makers. Today's webinar is in the same series, and we are very fortunate to have the best minds in the banking industry to come and speak to us. To conduct the session today, we have requested Mr. Jani, who is the expert of eGrow Foundation, to chair the session and conduct the proceedings. While he'll introduce the other speakers, I would just like to mention that in today's webinar, we have Mr. Kalia, who is also a very respectable and highly experienced banker. And then we have Mr. Madan Sabdavis, who's also been writing and very respected as an economist. So we have the best minds today again speak to us on the banking issues. With this, let me hand over the proceedings to Mr. Jani to conduct the session. Mr. Jani, please.
Very good evening to all. During this COVID time, lots of the issue has come up in the banking sector. We can talk two things, one during COVID and post-COVID. Now, during COVID, we all know that the business had a problems. Manufacturing was down, service sector was also down, and in view of this, the banks which has given the loans, either it's a term loan or working capital, has suffered, and the buyers or the borrowers were not in a position to pay as on date. Now, when these payments are not coming on the particular time, then the accounts become stressed and then subsequently NPA. Only thing is now, COVID, of course, is still there. It's not gone, but there's a 90% recovery, and banking has been almost normal. And I must say that not because I'm from the banking fraternity. Everybody was talking very big about the all warriors of the COVID, for the doctors and then the sanitary workers and the police and nurses. Very few people has talked about the banking warriors. I can say that not a single day banking was closed, online banking or ATM banking, or there was not a single day when there was no cash inside the ATM. The Reserve Bank had a team of about 200 officers working around the clock to see that online banking is already there, cash is already there in the currency chest, and then subsequently into the ATM. So all my colleagues, I feel proud today that all my banking fraternity during this period has come up to the expectations and has done definitely a superb job. Now coming to the NPAs also there are two things. Now as on today, if we take the stock of the situation, when the things are becoming normalized and manufacturing sectors also is improved quite a lot, there are two things. One is the stress assets or the accounts which have not become the NPA, and the accounts which have become the NPA. Now, if accounts have become the NPA, then banks have not much leeway to do anything but to make the provisioning. But when you are making provision, if it has become the NPA, then definitely we have to do the deep restructuring to see that in coming 1 or 2 years, because the situation will take some more time to stabilize and come back to the normal when the all these borrowers have a good cash flow, So bankers should basically, for all these NPAs where they feel that they have to do the deep restructuring, after making provisioning, they should do the deep structuring, giving a good relief for these borrowers for at least 2 years. By the time the situation is likely to improve or come to the normal, or maybe better than that. But now there are a large number of accounts which are stress accounts and which has not become NPA, but if you don't do anything, then it may slip to the NPA. Normally, it is seen that the monitoring in the banking sector is slightly lethargic because the branch and the zonal office and head office, the moment the head office comes to know, the time has already passed. So in such situations, also today, the most of the staff are not able to come, like in Bombay. Still, local trains are not working, so all the staffs are not able to attend the offices. So today, bank has to concentrate on the stress assets and not to wait 30 days or 60 days and all that. Now, when we are saying that it has to be proactive approach by the banks, they have to do a very clearly segregation about the priority. When you are now going through your stress assets in the banking sector, at the head office level, at the zonal office level, at the general manager level, or at the branch level. Now, the stress assets are also across the board. It is there for the very big borrower. It is there for the borrowers who are in the medium sectors. It is there for the borrowers who are in the small and tiny sectors. Head office of all the banks, they should definitely identify and prioritize. When I say prioritize that, if you are doing a restructuring of small 100 cases, but you miss one big cases to do proper restructuring at a particular time, then you have to make a big provisioning. So banks has to now decide about the priority that they have to take care at the head office level, at the zonal office level, and at the branch level. Because there are large number of cases which are likely to be under stress. And you can't do all the stress cases immediately. It takes time because there is a staff shortage also. Plus, many people are not able to attend office because of the corona. So first thing I feel that the bank should prioritize and then they should decide that which cases has to be prioritized and do immediately and which cases can wait for 10 days, 15 days, 30 days. Because once it is stressed, till it become NPA, you have that time period. So first and foremost thing is to prioritize about the cases which require to be restructured during the stress period. Now, when we say that stress period, another second thing will come about that is that the branch level, uh, they have to prepare the restructuring proposal and they have to send to the zonal office. Then there are certain delegation of power which is to go from zonal office to the head office. So that time limit also has to be kept into mind that how much time you take in branch, how much time the zonal office will take, and how much time it will be taken in the head office, so that during the particular time, the proper restructuring can be done before it becomes NPA. Now, restructuring also, there are two types of restructuring today. There are restructuring which is allowed by the policy of the Reserve Bank without making the NPA. And there are second lot where which doesn't come into the definition of the Reserve Bank of India, but still under stress and you have to do the restructuring of those cases. Because if you do restructuring, you have to make the NPA and provisioning. So this segregation is a must for the all banking people at every level, either branch, zonal office level, or maybe at the head office level. Second major issue is that the major requirement of funds at this stage by the most of this borrower is a working capital. Today, there are very few people will require the term loan because nobody is going for the expansion. Maybe a few may go for the bottlenecking or replacement of the few machines here and there. But the major requirement, maybe 90% or more than that, will be for the working capital. It has been observed that most of the banks are late or delayed about sanctioning and releasing the working capital, because it is an annual feature, and branches and the journal office should not wait. Okay, once the 1 year will be over, then the company will come to us and then we'll have an examine. Because after 1 year, when the company has to come to you for the reassessment and increase in the working capital, it has to go for the rating, maybe external rating, internal rating, depending upon the policy. Now, rating also takes time. So by that time, company's requirement of working capital for the next full year, it takes 4 months or 6 months delay. And this delay is killing the working capital, killing the all these borrowers, which has been seen in the banking sector in a normal time. This is the extraordinary time. So what bankers should now decide, that they have to sit and then they have to monitor all the accounts where the working capital renewal is pending, or working capital renewal is required to be done after 2 or 3 months, depending upon 1 year. So not to wait for the companies, but to start dialogue with them, start collecting the information from them, and then, because definitely your increased requirement is based on your 1 full year requirement, 1 full year results. But by the time full year results comes, banks should be ready with all the data. Only the full year data comes, immediately they should do their internal rating, and maybe within a 1 month they should sanction and release the working capital, either it's a cash credit or letter of credit, whatever is there. So today, major requirement of all the borrowers across the board, either big, medium, or small, is a working capital. Because what had happened in the pandemic, if the industry is not running for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or partially running, they have a large number of bills to pay, maybe electricity bill, maybe their salary and wages, maybe they have to buy new raw materials for the, depending upon the orders what they have. So all these things. So major thing is now post-COVID, bankers must concentrate more on the working capital, and normally it should not be delayed more than 2 months after the full 1 year is there for review, sanction, and release. This is a very, very important today. If we have to help our industry to come out very fast and then increase their capacity utilization. Then another one thing is that across the board, all the cases will not require restructuring. There are certain cases which are doing very well. There are certain products which are doing very well. There are certain commodities which are doing very well. They are making profit. Because if you take the certain industry, like take the ready-to-eat foods, take the biscuit industry, take the bread industry. All these industries are doing extremely well, because chocolate industry. All these type of industries are doing very well during this pandemic because of the online and packed food and all that. So they don't require. So again, the banks has to definitely segregate that which are the borrowers who require the restructuring, which are, because sometimes a borrower doing very well also will be tempted to come to you and to tell you the problems and then want their restructuring. So that segregation is also required, that whether it is required or not. Another thing, that now this working capital requirement has to be approved by the different committees depending upon the delegation of powers in different banks. Now, normally there are set rules that the credit committee will meet maybe once in a week, once in a 10 days, once in a 15 days, or executive committee of the board will meet once in a 2 months. Today's situations, you should not adhere to all these norms. Even if required, you have to have 2 or 3 credit committee in a week. If the number of cases are ready, meet as much as required, maybe 2 times, 3 times in a week. The idea is that your sanction disbursement has to be as fast as possible so that it goes at the right time. I must say that I don't get ashamed also that many times, because of the uh, delay in the sanction and disbursement by the banks, also certain industries become under stress. So we have to also learn and be very proactive in telling all our borrowers that what are the requirements if they want to increase in the working capital. Not that they issue one letter to you, then you ask another one later, then some information come, then again you ask some other information. With piecemeal information taking 2-3 months, then the entire system is delayed and then it is affecting the industry. So as a banking community, also we must look into that from our side. This is the time you have to become proactive. And it is in the interest of the bank, because if you are able to save the stress account, if you are able to save the NPS, definitely it is going to help for the lowering the provision and the good profit. And let me tell you one thing, that as a banker of my 34 years experience, I have seen that if you are proactive and if you go to the borrower and then try to help him, tell, yes, what are the problems here? I am here. Tell me your problems. We'll sit with you. We'll sort it out. That borrower will stick to you, and even if the other banks are offering 0.5% lower, they will not go. So bankers also has to create a loyal borrowers by helping them in a real-time basis. Another thing, bankers, and particularly the head office and the journal level, they have to take the review. Now, when I say review, means the review of 4 different levels. One is a branch-wise review. Every branch, how many cases are there, how many are doing very good, how many are stress assets, how many are NPA, and at a branch, how many stress cases required to be restructured. That is the branch-wise review. Second review has to be region-wise. You have to take all the regions and see that which region has got more problem, because maybe western region might not have more problem, but then eastern region have more problem. So you cannot say that I concentrate everybody at a time. Sometimes you concentration require more on the places, the region where there are more problems. So review on the branch wise, then second review on the region wise, and the third is review industry wise, because during pandemic there are different effect on the different industries. So review that which industries has done well, which industries done very badly, which industries can do better, but is not able to do better because there is a problem about raw material, working capital, and all that. So you review the industry wise also, and then decide that how you are going to help a particular type of industries where you can think that you can reduce the stress asset or reduce the NPA. And the fourth is review the group wise. In all banks, there are groups which have got 2 accounts, 4 accounts, 6 accounts. So review the group wise also, because in the group there are 2 companies which are doing very well, but there are 2 other companies which are not doing very well. So that group wise also. So the review of the stress assets and the NPA has to be based on the 4 parameters: branch wise, region wise, product wise, or the industry wise, and the group wise. So this is the way. If you are able to do proactively, and once with proactively you move, then definitely the restructuring can take place at the right time. A right restructuring also has to take place. And then at the end of the 31st March 2021, I think banks will not have much problem about provisioning if they have done this exercise proactively and just in time. Sometimes restructuring also, we are as a bankers, we are very orthodox. So don't be orthodox in this particular area or in particular time. Be slightly more liberal, and then see that even though I've done restructuring, but then I want to recover within 6 months. So again, after 6 months, the company will be again in the stress, will not be able to. Then if you have to do restructuring, then their question will come about the NPA, because it's a second restructuring. So major NPS problem which I can sum up past COVID-19 is, one is that concentrate on the size of the industry, being medium, small, and all that, and see that how best you can save this industry and provisioning. That is the first thing. Second thing, be proactive for the working capital assessment and the sanctions. 3, have as many as meetings. Don't stick to your parameters once in a week or once a fortnight. If I have got 10 cases, let us have the credit committee for 10 cases. So that after committee sanction, then there is a question about documentations, then the compliance, then only you can disperse the money because it takes time. So let the meetings meet as quickly as possible. Then the review of the four different ways. I think bankers can do this 4-5 points seriously. A major problem about stress assets or likely NPS, they will be able to sort out. Now coming to our second subject about frauds in post-COVID-19. Post-COVID-19, my major worry is that is a KYC because there will be a lot of problems in compliance of KYC during this period, which will come out once we start knowing about the fraud. In a normal time also, sometimes the KYC is not proper, then it takes to the fraud. During this pandemic also, I think that somewhere if KYC is not properly followed up, or the people have tried to become smart and given the wrong KYC, the fraud must have taken place or must be taking place right now when we are talking. I'm more worried about frauds in the Jan Dhan accounts also. Because right now, though, we are sending all government, state government, central government, a very good idea that we send direct money to them so that there is no middleman and they can withdraw the money and they can purchase the basic raw materials. But as we have seen that in any system, there are always black sheeps. So my worry is in Jan Dhan Yojana also maybe that all the banks has to definitely take a very strong review of Jan Dhan Yojana by December, because in the last quarter, starting from January, all the banks will be again more focused on the more business, more disbursement, more recovery. At least by December, at least banks should go and do the due diligence about the Jan Dhan accounts which their banks are having and what are the status and what are the problems. Third thing, I'm more worried about the ATM frauds. Because now, because of pandemic, banks people are not able to go to the branches, and people go to the ATMs. Now, today we don't know that what type of frauds has taken place or taking place because all these frauds are being referred to the Reserve Bank of India, and as and when Reserve Bank of India declares details about the frauds, then we will come to know. But my worry is that during this period, the more fraud would have taken place as far as the ATMs are concerned. Then the fourth is the phishing, because the number of hackers were very active during this period sitting at home, and the people were buying everything online and using their cards, and this has created a huge fraud by way of phishing or by way of asking the people about their OTP and their password and all that. And this fraud also must have increased during the pandemic, and unless we come to know that what is the modus operandi and all that, then only we'll be able to take the what has happened and how the action has to be taken for all this. But I'm sure that the large number of fraud must have taken in ATM because of this, even during because of the phishing also. Some frauds must have taken also in retail banking. Of course, there are large number of cross check is already put by the government, Reserve Bank of India, Ministry of Finance, and all that. So there is no double financing and all that. But still, like wrong KYC here also, there must be some frauds on the double financing or taking a loan under somebody else's name, or there's some wrong address and all that, which will definitely come to know. Another area of concern for me is SME, where the government has come out with a sanction within 59 days. 59. So that 59, all the banks have been sanctioning and disbursing. I am not sure whether all these accounts have been monitored by the banks and whether they will find out that all these accounts, after giving loan, money has gone to them or there were frauds. A number of frauds will also come out from this area also. Now, post audit, now the major threat is on all this fraud which has taken place, but nobody is come to know. हालांकि all the banks are supposed to refer the frauds to the Reserve Bank of India. And the Reserve Bank of India also monthly circulate all different types of frauds to the different banks. And based on that, all the banks, they also try to take precautions so that this type of fraud doesn't happen. But by the time this information comes to the banks, 4-5 months has already gone. And the same modus operandi number of frauds is already taken. So, other major concern post-COVID for fraud is today, since the people are busy for the restructuring, saving from NPA, provisioning, giving more fresh loan. Today, audit is not taking place the way it should have. It was being taken care of in the normal time. Because audit is now slightly on the back side, and the business and how to save the NPA is on the front side. Unless audit goes to the branches and then find out that what had happened about all this fraud during the pandemic, we will not be able to come. So I would like, or I would think that all the bankers, once that still some normalcy comes back, the December, January, they should have a 2 months focus on audit of all the branches. Because otherwise, you will go in the audit, suppose based on the full year, maybe in the May or June, by the time the large number of frauds have taken place, and we will not come to know. So basically, banks also should take care about a quick audit. May not be detailed audit, because we have number of audit. We have concurrent audit, we have cost audit, we have branch audit, we have internal audit, we have external audit, we have Reserve Bank audit. Let the bank's auditors find out some format quickly only for frauds, and then try to take care about 1 or 2 months, say whatever fraud, so that before March they can put their house in order. So otherwise, what will happen? The audit is taking sideline. Audit will take place only after the full year of March 2021. By that time, you have June, and then you will come to know, "Arey, itna sara fraud ho gaya, aisa ho gaya, waisa." So basically, the frauds, my take is like that. Fraud has taken place. We don't know today. Either it's a ATM, either it's a phishing, either it's a general account, or because of the lacuna in the KYC or anti-money laundering. We have to, or the bankers has to be very careful for a quick audit about the frauds. And the last I will tell that I was also in charge of the HR in my bank, and we have put a lot of focus on training to the auditors, but very few banks has put focus on training for how to save the frauds. Very few banks. So banks has to put in training program maybe at least 1 or 2 lectures about how the fraud takes place, how we have to be very careful to avoid such frauds, and if fraud has taken place also, how we have to be immediately active to sort out that fraud. Because any fraud, initially 1 or 2 days, if you are after that, you will be able to recover some money. But the moment 3, 4, 5 days is gone, the money is gone. So bankers also should now put a good training program for their people about the types of frauds taking place in the banking sector, how to take care that it doesn't happen, and even if it happens, how to sort it out as early as possible. With this, I think that I try to cover up major areas about NPA stress assets during the post-COVID and the fraud which has taken place, and how we have to learn from the fraud which has taken place. Now, I will request my colleague, Mr. Kalia Saab, to say about his views in the matter. Kalia Saab.
Good evening, fellow panelists, as also to all the participants. I mean, let me start by saying that COVID-19 has been a very unprecedented event which has engulfed the entire world, including India. It was some kind of black swan event which was never anticipated, and governments all over the world were made to think very seriously as to what we should do in order to respond to this kind of pandemic, because the choice was between saving lives and saving livelihoods. That was the choice that the governments have before them, because as per the medical experts, it was important that there is a lockdown that is imposed for the purpose of saving lives. But concomitantly, the impact of the lockdown on the economy of the respective countries was going to be very severe. But the choice has to be made, and most countries in the world have to make the choice of going in for saving lives by imposing lockdown. In a country like India, we had this national lockdown where all economic activities came to a standstill excepting for some essential services almost from 25th March 2020 to 31st May 2020. And that really impacted the ongoing economic activity in the country. The supply side disruption was immense. The demand side was collapsing because of the wage cuts, job losses, and all the industrial activity, manufacturing activity, service sector started facing the pinch of this particular lockdown that was imposed in order to save lives. A lot of demands were being made at that point of time that while lives are important, livelihoods are also important, because if livelihoods are not saved, probably that would also impact on the lives of the citizenry. Under these circumstances, I think I must say to the credit of Reserve Bank of India as also to the Government of India that they came out with timely packages. RBI came out with a regulatory package in the month of March itself, giving moratorium for a period of 3 months in respect of payment of interest and installments in the first instance, and then extended it by another period of 3 months in order to alleviate the kind of hardship that were being faced by all sectors of the economy because of this lockdown. Simultaneously, Government of India also came out with a stimulus package, which as per government own estimates was almost 10% of the GDP, amounting to 20 lakhs of crores, though many of the economists would dispute whether this was exactly of that nature or not. But fact of the matter is that it was a huge regulatory package that was provided by Government of India, particularly to take care of vulnerable sectors, especially MSME sector, for which this emergency credit line guarantee scheme was announced for an amount of 3 lakh of crores, which is currently in operation till 30th November. And they came out with a special scheme for stressed SMEs, then fund of fund schemes to provide equity support to those SMEs which were viable and having potential. So all these measures were being taken for all vulnerable sectors, particularly NBFC sector. There were special measures that were taken. All these measures really eased the kind of hardships that were being faced by the industrial units, manufacturing units, all sections of the economic activity that were impacted because of the lockdown. But it was going to have its own impact. This pandemic actually hit our country when we were already going through a process of economic slowdown. Friends, as you must be aware, GDP growth of the country for the year ending 2019-20 was 4.2%. And last quarter, that is March quarter, growth was only 3.1%. This was the time when this pandemic hit and we have to go in for that lockdown. what happened as a result of the lockdown, that there was a contraction in GDP of 23.9% in the first quarter of the current financial year, that is 2021. And it is expected by the economists that quarter two also will have a contraction of around 12%. Now, that if this is the kind of impact on the GDP growth, it is quite natural that the asset quality of the banks is also going to get impacted. There is no way there can be there has to be a correlationship between what is happening to the GDP growth and what is happening to the credit, that is credit quality of the banking system. And NPA levels, which have come down from September 19 level to March 20, from 9.3% to 8.5%, as per the Financial Stability Report of Reserve Bank of India, were expected to go up to 12.5% for the financial year 2021. That is an increase of 400 basis points in the gross NPAs. And that is on a baseline scenario when all other even things remain the same. In a severe stress scenario, this was expected by RBI as per Financial Stability Report to be 14.7%. Now, naturally, the question comes as to what is going to be the kind of NPA which banks are going to get settled with. When RBI provided this particular regulatory package, and this particular package, liquidity support to the banking system, at that point of time, they were cognizant of the fact that it is going to have impact on the asset quality of the banks going forward. And that is why it was directed by RBI that in respect of all such accounts where the moratorium is being extended, the banks must provide 10% provisioning, 5% in March quarter and 5% in June quarter. The intention was very clear that part of the loan accounts where moratorium relief would be provided is going to get impacted after the period of moratorium is going to be over. And fact of the matter is that as per the reports that we have received, almost 50% of total loan accounts, they sought the moratorium relief. Now, even if we believe that 5% of that is going to get into NPAs, you just can imagine whether whatever is projected by RBI is going to come true. Certainly it is going to come true. But that is one scenario. Another scenario that I would like to share with you is about the comments that are being made by the chief executives of various banks who have declared their financial results for the year ending, for the half year ending September or quarter ending September 30th, 2020. Most of the banks are stating that they have the confidence that the provision that they have made for COVID-19 relief in the months of March and June would be providing enough cushion for the purpose of taking care of the NPA position. Now, whether that is going to come true or not, that is something that has to be weighed in light of the observations being repeatedly made by RBI Governor himself. RBI Governor, while he was addressing a conclave at SBI conclave, he did mention that NPAs of the banking system are going to go significantly up. And he also mentioned that it is important that the banks must recapitalize themselves and try to have much better capital buffers, capital adequacy with them as compared to what they have now. So, guided by whatever comments have been made by the RBI governor, whatever observations are being made by certain rating agencies, if I talk about India ratings, they have said that almost 8.9 trillion, that means 8 lakh 90,000 crores worth of advances are going to be restructured. RBI is providing all kind of support. They have come out with a restructuring scheme in order to help the borrowers to tide over this problem in the belief that over a period of time when the economic activities resume, things would settle down, and by this restructuring package that has been provided, banks would be in a position, borrowers would be in a position to generate over a period of 2 years the kind of cash flows that would enable them to service their debts on an ongoing basis. Now, I personally believe that looking to the level of rising collection efficiencies which are being reported by various banks, helped by increase in the economic activities. I mean, this is not that economic activity has improved in all sectors. There are, as RBI pointed out in the monetary policy report, there are going to be 3 stages. Some sectors have really opened their accounts, have started, having recorded very good recovery. Some are still in the process, and there are some sectors which are really stressful, like aviation sector is there, entertainment sector is there, hospitality sector is there. They are under still severe stress. Now, whether there has to be a sector-specific approach or general approach, that's a different proposition altogether. But fact of the matter is, RBI within its power has provided all kind of reliefs to the borrowing community and to the banks in order to ensure that there is no hard landing after the period of moratorium is over, and therefore there should not be that kind of surge in the NPAs of the banks. Quarter third and quarter fourth would reveal the true picture, because I believe September quarter doesn't reveal the true picture. This quarter third, particularly when the Supreme Court order not to declare any fresh account which was not NPAs on 31st August, if that stay order is vacated, I think then the banks would know exactly what is the kind of, stress that they are facing in respect of those accounts where the moratorium was provided, and even generally on the basis of whatever has been happening to several sectors of the economy. Because it is not only on those accounts, it is also the impact which this particular pandemic and general economic slowdown has on certain specific sectors. So I personally believe that whatever has been projected in the financial stability report of around 12.5%, so far as baseline scenario is concerned, is something that we can definitely look forward to. And the banks would have to brace themselves for shoring up their capital levels. And that is much more true for public sector banks, because private sector banks of late have already taken initiatives to augment their capital levels by going in for raising of capital through different routes. PSBs, Government of India has provided only 20,000 crores by way of supplementary demands. But there is much more that the public sector banks would require. From where this money is going to come is a question that still doesn't have any answer, because if we look at the valuation of the public sector banks, current valuations, price to earning ratio, price to book value, I don't think there is a chance for them to go and raise, funds from general market. Probably government would have to come out with much more capital infusion than 20,000 crores, which They have already got the approval from the Parliament and Cabinet, and it is believed that this 20,000 crores would be made available to the banks by December 2020. That is so far as NPS is concerned. So my take is NPS would definitely go up, and the real scenario would emerge after third and fourth quarter of the current financial year. Certainly, I am of this opinion that by quarter four, there is going to be definitely positive growth in GDP, and quarter one of financial year 21-22 would, of course, because of the base effect, would have tremendous GDP growth. That is what my personal belief is. And accordingly, NPA levels of the bank for the current financial year is going to be an elevated level. Coming to the question of frauds, see, it is not only the NPAs that impact the profitability of the bank and creates impact on the capital level of the banks. It is also the frauds. And why frauds have become so significant and why there has to be a discussion on frauds. If we look at the data for the frauds in the banking system, over 1 lakh, we are talking not of less than 1 lakh, over 1 lakh, which is reported to RBI. 1.85 lakh crores worth of frauds were there in the banking system, over 1 lakh for the financial year ending 2019-20, which was a significant twofold increase from the level of frauds that was there in the year 2018-19, which were around 71,000. In fact, over a period of 8 years, if you see, there is a constant increase in the level of number of frauds. And unfortunately, 98% of the frauds, while there are payment-related frauds, cyber security-related frauds, deposit-related frauds, but 98% of the frauds are loan frauds, which is the area where the bankers have to bestow their attention. And this, out of this 1.85 lakh crores, 80% of the frauds were coming from where? From the public sector banks. Whereas the number of cases where the frauds took place was for public sector banks was only 50%, but the amount was 80%. That clearly indicates the kind of disproportionate exposures that are taken in such vulnerable accounts by public sector banks. So this is why it happens. We are all aware that's a very lengthy discussion because bankers have very poor, I should not be saying I am myself a banker, but fact of the matter, not poor, but lax credit underwriting standards sometimes we adopt. And there is also not that kind of robust and effective credit monitoring mechanism. Unless and until there is a very robust credit appraisal system and very effective credit monitoring mechanism, I am not sure whether we will be able to have timely detection of frauds or prevention of frauds. RBI came out with a framework of, monitoring of loan frauds, where they came out with a concept of early warning signals and red flagged account concept. I am of the opinion that if those guidelines of RBI of tracking the early warning signals in the accounts are really monitored or tracked properly, and we are in a position without getting into, this kind of arrangements, wherever we believe that there is a fraudulent activity, suspicion of fraudulent activity, because of presence of one or more early warning signals thrown up by the system, if we start really red flagging accounts, going in for investigation, trying to find out, I think we would be in a position to really contain the fraudulent activities at an incipient stage and save a lot of money going fraudulent. I am personally, see, the point that I was making was moment why banks are not very meticulously following up red flagging an account is because they know once the account has to be declared as a fraud, you have to make 100% provision, irrespective of whatever is the security in the account. Now that is a deterrent which they believe, but they don't understand that the realizable value of that account is going to be severely impacted in case there is not either prevention of that fraudulent activity or early detection and timely action. That is why this particular framework that has come, they have given guidelines that have to be followed by the bank at the time of pre-sanction, at the time of sanction, disbursement, and also annual review, post-monitoring mechanism, staff empowerment, role of auditors. All these guidelines have been provided by the banks. And if that is actually implemented by the banks, I am sure that loan frauds can be minimized to a great extent. Heartening feature is that the first quarter, there has been a significant decline in the amount of fraud that are reported, which is around 28,000 as compared to 42,000 in the previous quarter of financial year 2019-20. But I personally believe that this can be because of whatever, there was hardly any activity and we may not have been able to really come out with the detection of these frauds. So I personally believe while there would be always some element frauds, and my friend has already spoken about various kind of initiatives that need to be taken by the banks in order to sensitize. What is very important is also that staff should be encouraged to report any such fraudulent activity that they observe. Auditors must be encouraged to report any fraudulent activity that they observe while carrying out the audit, and to the even directly to the chairman of the audit committee of the board. These kind of steps would really help in the containment of frauds. Otherwise, I mean, just because RBI, of course, I must say that in order to encourage the banks to timely report the frauds immediately within a week of detection of that fraud, or immediately within a week of one red flagged accounts turning into fraud, they have allowed the dispensation to the banks to make this provision, which is required otherwise for 100% over a period of 4 quarters. So those kind of dispensations are being provided. But it is important that if we have to cushion our balance sheets, not to make these kind of frauds, and to avoid what has happened in Nirav Modi case, with Anjali Gems case, ILFS case, whether it is PMC case and HDIL case, Yes Bank case and DHFL case. I mean, if we have to avoid these kind of situations, it is very important that there has to be prevention and early detection of frauds, and there has to be a much more robust credit appraisal system and much more effective credit monitoring system. I personally believe that in case the banks are in a position to integrate this tracking of early warning signals into their credit monitoring mechanism, then it would be much easier for us to keep a control over the nature of activities that are going on in a particular account. I have always, as a banker, believed that the real work of the banker starts when the loan is disbursed. Follow up is the sense of all advances. And I cannot emphasize much to say that post disbursement monitoring can really help the banks in containment of NPAs, in containment of frauds. Thanks. Thank you so much. Yes, Mr. Jani. Mr. Jani, you are mute.
Now, may I request Mr.
Yeah.
Madanji? Madan, now floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good evening to everyone. And thanks to Dr. Charan Singh for getting me onto this panel. Now, I'm going to speak as an economist, so I'm not a banker. So while I work with a credit rating agency, CARE Ratings, what I say is not the view of CARE Ratings. It's not the view of what the rating agency feels about the banking sector. So therefore, I am ring fencing myself, saying that what I say is a view of an economist. So I stand by it as an economist, but not as a rating agency. Now, actually, when I talk of this particular situation, I think there's a bit feeling of deja vu which we get, because if you go back to the Lehman crisis in 2007, 2008, 2009, I think that was a time when the entire world economy got affected in a different kind of a manner. There was a financial crisis. But if you look at the kind of reactions which were there in the Indian economy, if you look at what the RBI did and what the government of India did, I think there's a lot of similarity out there. We kept lowering the interest rates. We tried to make sure that credit picks up. That was the job of the RBI. And if you look at the government of India, there was a lot of fiscal stimulus which was provided. And then, of course, the economy did very well. And we, with a touch of hubris, said that, look, we are the fastest growing economy. And there's a lot of decoupling which has taken place between the emerging markets and the Western economy. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up this issue is that maybe after around 4 or 5 years, we realized that we had an easy credit policy. Money was available very easily to corporates. So there was large infrastructure projects which were undertaken. And we finally did see very high growth rates. And then at the end of the day, we said that, look, we followed the right kind of stimuli. And the Indian economy has delivered. It has grown at 8% per annum on a continuous basis. And during this period of time, at some point of time, it was felt that, look, so there were certain controversies which were there in different areas. In telecom, you had coal, you have iron ore, and the power sector. So various sectors got affected on account of these problems. And we all sat down and said that, look, a company is not able to perform not because it's bad or anything, but because of overall external environment, which is not good, because of certain crimes which are committed somewhere else, which led court cases and all kinds of things. Projects got stalled. So this concept of stalled projects came in, and we decided that, look, let's not call them NPAs. We'll call it, we'll restructure these assets. So we had this concept of restructuring which came in, the CDR came in, and therefore lots of these assets were restructured. And we still said that our NPA is at the region of 3%, 4%, and the banking system was very stable. I remember a long time back when I started my career in ICICI Limited, we used to talk of something called evergreening. And I always, as an economist, believe that when we speak of restructuring, like it or we don't like it, whatever could be the cause of it, the fact is if I don't repay a loan and I restructure it, it's nothing else. I give you one loan or I extend that loan, we're nothing else but keeping it alive by calling it a good loan. We're giving it a different kind of name, but at the end of the day, if as a banker, I'm lending to you and you're not returning the money, there is a problem which we did not. Now, this was a concept which was also furthered by the central bank. Everybody felt it was all right. Then one fine day, the Reserve Bank says that, look, this cannot really go on. We should have the AQR and we should start recognizing all these assets. And then all of us took a lot of umbrage and we said, look, what's happening in the public banks, public sector banks, private sector banks, everybody is the same. And the NPA started shooting up 10%, 11%, 12%. And there was a lot of order which was restored. So lots of things which we didn't know was happening in banks got revealed when we had this AQR which came through. And finally, at the end of the day, we saw that the banking system was in a fair amount of turmoil. The public sector banks were under pressure, so therefore we had the government had to chip in to provide the capital. Where was the capital coming from? All kinds of statistical techniques we used. Recapitalization bonds, which is an accounting entry. So I always thought it was a very easy way to recapitalize banks by just saying I'm keeping an accounting entry. I give you a loan, that same amount is subscribed by you, and I give it back to you in the form of loan. So fiscally, it was all right. It was very good financial engineering which was done, but the system came into. And I think that the banks have actually sort of, I would say, they've acquitted themselves. And by the time we came to 1920, as Subhashji has mentioned, in fact, I must say that whatever Subhashji said, I'm going to reiterate whatever he has said. So I'll sort of paraphrase it on the issue of NPAs and pandemic. But we said, okay, NPAs came down to around 8.5%, and we felt that the worst was behind us, and the banking sector could actually look for better. And suddenly we had this pandemic which came in, and what did the pandemic mean? There was, of course, panic. They said first of a lifetime, and therefore we have to do everything to make sure the economy gets back on track. And so, therefore, the ball was thrown first in the RBI's court. So what does the RBI do? Is start pumping in a lot of liquidity, give lots of funding to the banks. You have these, earlier we had LTROs, TLTROs, open market operations. You kept lowering the interest rate. I think the savers started shouting, saying that, look, what happens to retired people? We can't live. But they said, no, growth is most important. We don't bother about savers. Right now, let's make sure that growth comes strong. So therefore, funds were available at a very low price. The repo rate was brought down to 2%. A lot of money has been provided. If you look at the RBI's daily press release, you realize that there's around 5.5 lakh crores of funds which are going into the reverse repo. What does this mean? Basically, banks are taking money from the RBI or whatever surpluses are there in the system, and you don't know where to put the money, or you don't want to put your money somewhere, so therefore you're investing in the reverse repo. We as economists feel that even though the government's fiscal deficit could go up to 9%, there won't be any problem for the government because there's a lot of liquidity in banks, and banks are very much willing to invest in these government securities. So the situation seems to be almost similar. The RBI did what it did in 2008-9 post Lehman. It's the very same thing which is happening here. But I think a lot of lessons have been learned. So I think that's the main reason why I brought up this Lehman issue, is that the two situations are analogous, but the way in which the banking system has responded has been very, very responsible right now. So why do I say they're responsible? I think banks are very much credit risk averse. So as an economist, I talk to quite a few bankers, both public sector bankers and private sector bankers. They all say that we are credit risk averse. We don't mind what the RBI says, saying about transmission, why you're not lending. Government may say anything, but I'm not going to lend money if I know I cannot get the money back. I think the mindset of bankers has changed today. They're more cognizant of the fact that you should not just be lending because someone tells you to do it. So that's one good thing which is happening. If you look at the way in which the RBI has gone about it, when I say RBI, I would say actually it's the establishment. The RBI government both have been working together. We first said that there's going to be a moratorium. So what does the moratorium say? That I don't have to pay for 3 months. Then you say you don't have to pay for 6 months. But I go back to the fundamental issue of what Subhash has said, that if the economy is not performing, NPAs have to increase. Okay, because if I'm not earning money, if I'm making losses, I don't have money. The banks, I mean, as a company, I borrowed money from you. And if I'm not able to repay it, it has to be an NPA. Now, I can call it a moratorium and say, okay, for 6 months you don't pay. I can restructure the asset if I want to. Okay, I'm deferring the problem for a later date, hoping that when the economy recovers and the person is able to service it, it's good enough. Otherwise, okay, bad luck. It will be a new story. We'd have forgotten what happened. Anyway, so I think that's how human beings behave. If you look at this whole concept of moratorium, we're talking of this restructuring. I think there's one-time restructuring which you have spoken of. Yes, I think there are different estimates, 3 lakh crores, 5 lakh crores. But from what we are hearing from the market, banks are still being very cautious when it comes to restructuring. They have not really taken it on, saying, let's start restructuring them. They know very well that, look, if I'm going to restructure the loan today and maybe after X number of years, it could be a problem. Similarly, if you look at another thing, the government gave this guarantee, this great guarantee, which has been given of 3 lakh crores for SMEs. I think it's a very good amount which has been given. It's a way to induce banks to lend. But if you look at the RBI data, it actually shows that, okay, we have seen around 2 lakh crores of sanctions have taken place, but you see the increase in the outstanding credit to the SMEs, it's actually come down. Okay, it's less than 1 lakh crores, which really means that a number of these SMEs are borrowing this money, they're repaying old loans, and these loans, banks are happy to lend it to them because there's a guarantee being given anyway. So it's been a kind of a win-win situation, but it's not money which is being added because of for bringing about growth. So I think that's the important takeaway out here, that everybody is being cautious about this one. So the system is working fairly well. We learned our lessons after what happened after Lehman, and banks are not repeating this mistake. Well, I would say that the fact that the economy is degrowing, that we have an estimate of 8.2% at CARE, RBI is saying 9.5%. These NPA levels are going to increase. Now, how much they're going to increase could be anyone's guess, because there's a lot of camouflaging going on, because all these methods which have been provided are ways of postponing the problem. Maybe the problem may not happen. Maybe economists tend to be pessimistic, so therefore I'm taking a pessimistic view, and maybe everybody will start servicing, but I don't think it's happened in the past. And therefore, we could be looking at, I would go more along with the RBI's best case scenario of saying the NPA levels could be coming something in the region of around 15% or so. I think that's what we are really looking at, could be the NPAs of the banking system. So actually, what should bankers be doing? What should RBI be doing? I think everybody should be aware of the fact that we have addressed the issue temporarily in the short run to make sure that the system carries on. Funds have been provided, banks are being cautious, but we have to think ahead and say that, okay, in case the NPs are going to come, are we ready to make the provisions? Certain provisions are going to be mandated, but are we going to make extra provisions? Second, as from the point of view of the government, they should have an open mind and say that at some point of time, if I get to know X number of public sector banks have to be capitalized, let me make a provision for it. So let's not just blind ourselves to say, okay, because I think I read in the paper saying that we are going to drag the entire world economy along, things are going to be great. Probably we will do it, but as far as the banks are concerned, since the government is the owner of the public sector banks, we have to make sure that we make this kind of, keep thinking about how am I going to capitalize these banks so that we'll be able to actually finance the kind of growth which we're talking about. So if we really think we're going to grow at 9 to 10% per annum, banks are a major source of finance. Whatever's happened in the bond market doesn't really matter. Finally, everybody goes back to banks. Public sector banks are a dominant player in this particular space. Have to be capitalized. So therefore, the government also should be on its toes, make sure that you make these provisions. How you do it is a different issue. You do it through the budget. Do you want to bring about recapitalization bonds? But at the end of the day, you will have to provide this kind of protection. I think we are in a situation, hopefully, I don't think I'm the only wise person out here. I think the banks are dealing with their own money. They know what to do. I think the government should also know what to do. Only we should not live in this world of saying that, look, everything is good because we have taken care of these issues, because maybe 3-4 years down the line, there could be a problem. We don't want to go back to the AQR days, which created a lot of mess. That's about NPAs. And in terms of fraud, again, I think, Subhashji, you said everything before what I wanted to say. In fact, the micro level frauds, I'm not really aware of what happens in banks. But yes, we don't want another Nirav Modi. We don't want another Vijay Mallya around. And I think there was a lot of symbiotic relationship between what happened with political powers. We also had the banks who were forced to do it. But I think that is very much behind us. One hopes so, because when PNC happened or when Yes Bank happened, none of us knew that these things were happening. So I think everybody has to be very much vigilant about it. I think one thing good about the government is that they keep reiterating saying there's no more phone banking taking place. So if it's an error of judgment, one can forgive. But if it's an error because of fraud which has taken place, probably it's unforgivable. So I don't think I have anything more to say, just that one has to be more vigilant. And more importantly, maybe when the RBI inspection keeps going on, you should probably look at the large borrowers, look at the top 100 borrowers, have kind of a threshold. And then you actually examine and say, okay, are these companies really doing well? Are these sectors doing well? Is there something wrong going on? Maybe a few more questions should be asked on these specific accounts so that it doesn't come as a kind of a bombshell to us at some point of time, saying in X bank, this kind of a thing, fraud has happened. And all of us say, oh, what was the regulator doing? What was the banks doing? What were we all experts doing? Because I think when Yes Bank happened, especially Yes Bank, lots of people felt it was the greatest bank, fastest growing bank, lowest amount of NPAs, and then there's a lot of umbrage when we get to know that something has gone wrong. I think these are good lessons which we have learned, and hopefully, I think if everybody pays attention the way one should, there should be a lower probability of these things recurring. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Now, all the participants, if they have any question, they are free to ask. If they want to ask specific question to any panel members, they can ask specific question to panel members. Or otherwise, I will be able to give the reply.
Jani ji, there are two questions in the panel already. Would you like? Should I just read them to you?
Yeah, you read.
There is a question.
No, whether they ask from specific panel member or it's a general question to all.
We can, there is one question from Mr. Ajay Kumar and the other is from Vijay Kumar Sarabu. We can request them to directly ask.
Let them ask that which panel member they want to ask.
Yes, they can, I think, directly ask.
Yes,
Mr. Ajay Kumar and Mr. Vijay Kumar Sarabu, why don't you ask your question directly? And on my cell phone, I understand Mr. Tripathi also wants to ask a question. So please ask your question directly.
Mr. Vijay Kumar.
So Vijay Kumar, you have to unmute yourself, I think.
You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
And still it is unmute. You are still unmute, Mr. Vijay Kumar. Hello. You are still unmute. We are not able to hear you. We are not able to hear you. Please check you are still on unmute mode.
Let me do one thing. Let me read the question that he has raised. There's probably some technical problem there. So Mr. Vijay Kumar has asked a question. Already NPAs of different banks are increasing in our country, especially in post-COVID-19. As an expert, what measures will you suggest to reduce NPAs and frauds in our bank? That is Mr. Vijay Kumar's question. And the question from Mr. Ajay Kumar. Mr. Ajay Kumar, you want to ask your question directly? Let me read that question to you from Mr. Ajay Kumar. Why provisioning is high? Private banks, particularly provisioning of IndusInd Bank is high, and they are not giving good increment and bonus to employee. They are exploiting to lower and middle class of employee. I think his question is basically why provisioning is high in some banks. And that is Mr. Ajay Kumar's question. And Mr. Vijay Kumar's question is, which I read it, already NPAs of different banks are increasing in our country, especially in post-COVID-19. As an expert, what measures you will suggest to reduce NPAs and frauds in our bank? Mr. Tripathi also has a question.
Let me answer this too. First, Ajay Kumar, see, there are difference between the public sector bank and the private sector bank. The norms for provisioning as per the Reserve Bank of India is same for almost all the banks. But some of the private sector banks, they are proactive and they don't wait for the longer period, and they make the provisioning sometime in the anticipation that the NPAs might increase, so we are making provisioning right now. And maybe that may be the one of the reason that the IndusInd Bank might have made some higher provisioning to see that at the end of the year, the total provisioning will be on the lower side. So that may be the one of the reason. Regarding Vijay Kumar's how we can reduce our NPA in the near future. See, to reduce the NPA, there is nothing like a magic wand, or there is nothing like you put certain system and it automatically will reduce the NPA. For future, if you have to reduce your NPA, a few things is required to be done by the banks. One is, as Mr. Kalia sir has told, that most of our banks, they are very poor or they are not up to the mark about the monitoring. If we monitor all the accounts well in advance and see the signals about the stress and try to help them that what are the problems and why they are under stress, and then how banks can help them to tide over the stress, the 50% problems will be already over if we are able to have a good monitoring system in place. Second thing, in any system, NPAs will always be there. There is no bank in the world who can say that we don't have NPA, because NPA is not only man-made, NPA are also made by the systems. Sometimes your raw materials you have to consider to be 100 rupees per kilo, and suddenly there is a shortage of raw material, it becomes 200 or 300 rupees kilo. Then the people at the hands have no control on that. So there are internal factors, there are external factors. Now, internal factors, we have some control where we can definitely, as a bankers, do good monitoring, choose good borrowers, try to help them at the right time. But external factors, definitely, like suddenly the pandemic has come. Nobody had thought 1 year back. Last September, October, nobody has any idea what is going to be there in the next October. So these are all external factors. You take another external factor, that there are a lot of war going on in the world, different countries. Today, USA also is going through the very uncertainty and all that. There is a trade war between the USA and the China. So these external factors also affect the businesses. So internal factors we can control, external factors definitely it has to be controlled jointly by the government of India, Reserve Bank of India, banking sectors, and of course the banking management.
Okay, I would like to add something here, if you permit me.
Yes.
You know, I think credit appraisal is very important part for a bank. Now, I think those skills need to be honed regularly so that you're in a better position to appraise whether the loan should be given or not. Okay, now I'm now talking a little bit because I'm in a rating agency. I've heard of some bankers saying that we just look at a rating given by a rating agency and we give the loan. Now, the criteria which we use, what we are looking at, could be different from what the bank is looking at. So there is a case for saying that we need to internally, banks need to make sure that they are good in doing their job. Because one part is the monitoring part. I think when you're monitoring, and let's also see the RBI data also shows that a lot of loans which are given by the banks are actually for lower rated sub-investment grade companies. Okay, because if you have a AAA rating, you borrow from the bond market. Everybody doesn't have a AAA or a AA rated one, so therefore you borrow from a bank. So the moment you know that a particular loan you're given to has a lower rating, let's assume that the size is very large, then you need to have specific monitoring attention which has to be paid for it. So I think appraisal and monitoring are the two important things which can at least ensure that internally you're protected. Then, as has been told to you, if there are external factors, then that's actually beyond your control. You may not be able to do much about the increase.
No, I agree, Madan. Today we are having a problem about the capacity or the expertise of the credit appraisal. Since a few years back, we had institutions which are having good expertise like IDBI, ICICI, and now this organization has become now the universal bank. So that expertise is now not available with the one place. I think that government also, there is a discussion internally that we have to have some sort of a DFI if you have to create the capacity of the credit appraisal supremacy. Because an officer who is an expert with the engineering background or the MBA or the chartered accountant, which can do very well for the credit appraisal, but if you put him as a branch manager to do the CASA and to bring the deposit and all that, so the fellow will be definitely disappointed. Then I'm a CA, I'm an engineer, and I've been put in the branch to take care about the deposit, the CASA, and small loans and all that. So purposefully, we have to create the capacity of credit appraisal. I fully agree with you.
This is Ashima Goyal. Can I make a comment?
Yes, madam. Okay, go on.
Yeah, I like this, Madan. I like your comment. There has been a lot of learning in banks. They've learned from the past episodes. But in the same way, I think there's learning by policymakers also. I like to characterize the Indian experience as overreaction, overstimulus after the global financial crisis, and then over-tightening over the next decade. So if you see now, moratorium has already been withdrawn, many restructurings given under strict conditions, and there is liquidity surplus, but it's not raising M3 because it's being absorbed in reverse repo, but it's helping reduce spreads and increase liquidity. And the reason why I think monetary policy can be particularly effective in the Indian case with coordination from the government to reduce risk aversion is because we're coming to liquidity surplus after a period of extreme tightening. The liquidity had totally dried up in the economy. NBFC stopped lending. So now liquidity is going into the economy, it's helping revive activity, perhaps explaining why we are seeing this turnaround currently. We saw a turnaround in high frequency data in February also, after liquidity became surplus in middle of 2019. So while the rest of the world is putting QE on top of QE when asset prices are stretched, we are coming to it as a reversal, and that also hopefully in a balanced way. So it will not lead to the kind of overstimulus that happened after the global financial crisis. Yeah, thank you.
Madam.
I agree with you, Ashima. Thanks.
Madam, see,
yes.
there are very good policies by Government of India. There are very good policy by Ministry of Finance. There are very good policy of Reserve Bank of India. All the banks' board of directors also have put a very good policy. The question is, as I have been telling, how we are following those policies, whether we are really following those policies. So one problem comes when we break the policy, when we don't follow the policy. So that is the one thing. And second thing, no policy should be very tight that you cannot break it. I tell you, one of my boss used to tell me, once he asked me that, Mr. Jani, are you manager? I was a deputy general manager. So he asked me that, Mr. Jani, you feel that you are really DGM? So I said, sir, I'm an engineer, I have an MBA, worked for 20 years in the project finance. So I am definitely reasonably better. He said, no. Because I put up some note. I put up some note that we cannot give this loan because it is not fitting in our policy. So he told me that this is a very good proposal. A good manager is supposed to break the policy, but it is to be in the interest of the organization. Now, when you think to break the policy, that means you are thinking that this policy is coming in the way of doing the business. So let us change the policy. There is no sanctity that no policy can be changed. And today's situations, every day things are moving very fast. We don't know what is going to be banking after 6 months, 1 year or 2 years. We have to be ready to change the policy. Either it's a Government of India, either it's a Reserve Bank or the bank's board, whatever is there. Policy gives you the direction, but whether we are following that policy properly, that is the main thing. And of course, external factors are always there. Whether it's a surplus fund, liquidity is there or not there and all that. There are a number of factors coming into that. There is no solution one fit to all. So when we decide about any policy, all the factor has to be taken into care.
Yes, that's true. It has to be interpreted on the ground. But as Madan was saying, banks have also learned, they've improved their systems, etc.
Yeah, banks have learned a lot. Banks have learned a lot over the last 10 years. All the banks, they have learned a lot, and then there are a lot of things which are internally banks are doing, which the common people may not be knowing also. There are how much efforts banks are putting and how many committees. I tell you, when I was preparing my profile, I came to know that in my IDBI bank, we had 24 committees of the senior people. And out of 24, 8 committees as an executive director, I was the chairman. Now, whatever committee, all 24 committees, many people will not be knowing. So today, banks have learned a lot. They are doing a really good job. But again, things are changing. We have to change very fast.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Next question.
Hi sir, this is Krishnanand Tripathi. I work with ATV Bharat. I cover economy and finance. I have questions for Mr. Sabnavis and Ms. Ashima Goyal. I will go slightly offbeat. I just wanted to ask if there is a change of guard in USA, how it will impact the Indian economy and Indian stock market, because these two leaders, Mr. Joe Biden and Mr. Trump, have completely different worldviews with regard to corporate tax rate in America and their trade policies. So how it will impact India going forward?
I would request Ashima to give a view first. I respect it. Ashima, could you go ahead first?
I think she has just left the meeting.
I think she has just left.
Okay, she left the meeting. Okay, in that case, I'll give my view. See, if we're looking in terms of Donald Trump coming to power, looks like it's going to be a continuity. So therefore, there's not going to be much difference in terms of what was happening earlier and what's going to happen now. But if we're talking in terms of Biden coming to power, I think things are going to be different. I think politically there could be an issue for India because they do have, the Democrats do have a different kind of an approach when it comes to what happens within the countries. Whereas Donald Trump has been very clear to say that what is an internal issue is an internal issue. So if you talk of certain the political issues, I think maybe a little more debatable in case we have Biden coming in. Now, in terms of the economy, it is felt that Biden would be definitely more hospitable when it comes to international trade relations in terms of immigration. So therefore, in the global context, I think probably India may be better placed, but whether we'll be actually able to make use of whatever happens, I'm not quite sure, because I still think India is a domestically driven economy. So therefore, they could be, they may not, I mean, I really don't know how they're going to leverage that particular part of it. So, and in terms of, we have seen that he's more for higher taxation. So that could also mean that it could affect the growth of US. So I'm not quite sure that in the current context, if it comes to power, given the fact that we have a recession, whether he will stick to that particular line or whether there would be any change. I think, Dr. Charan Singh, I think we'd like to hear your view also on it. I think you're an expert.
My views are actually totally in agreement with yours. I had also thought if there is continuity, then India will benefit to that extent. I totally agree with that view of yours. Now, if there's going to be some change of guard there, my own feeling is that the relationship between America and India and America and China will probably undergo some change. Now, that is extremely important for us. And given the financial global architecture, given the regional situation, the feeling is that it will take some time before America, if there is a change of guard, if America, if there's a change, by some time America will need to find its feet. In the meantime, we all know that China is firmly in the saddle, and therefore in the regional area, China will try to establish itself rather more aggressively. In the meantime, Americans may find that they have this crucial time has been lost and they are losing in the battle. As you would have noticed, China is fast gaining its income, while the rest of the world is suffering from severe recession. The severity is really not felt as far as China is concerned. So China's strategic moves will be further strengthened in case there is change in the over there. Now, this has implications for world trade, flow of funds, and fiscal movement. And I was very happy yesterday when I saw that the Fed Reserve has not changed its rates at all and has kept the near zero level fund rate, which of course I wasn't expecting them to go into the negative zone, but thinking aloud, at one point many countries in Europe have gone into the negative zone, but the Fed has not. That's okay. So my views are this is going to usher in too much of policy uncertainty in case there's going to be change of guard. Thank you.
Sir, I have a follow-up question on this issue, the NPS banking sector, to Mr. Sabnavis and Mr. Kalia also.
Yeah, please.
What are the new trends that we see in terms of banking frauds and NPS post-lockdown? What are the sectors other than the obvious sectors like travel, tourism, aviation, and hospitality, which are facing difficulties, and what are the new trends in frauds that you people have seen?
Yeah. So shall I take it, Mr. Madan? Yes, please. So far as these sectors which you have mentioned, I mean, definitely they are facing a lot of stress. But in respect of the fraud that you are talking about, I mean, since most of the transactions are digital, cybersecurity frauds area is one area where we have to be all very, very careful and cautious, because as the number of digital transactions go higher, the possibility of payment frauds and cybersecurity frauds taking place is getting higher. But what kind of impact it is going to have on the banking system, I personally believe that it will not be very significant, because all the data that we have analyzed for the last 8 years clearly indicate that the percentage of frauds other than the loan frauds is not even 2 to 5%. It is hardly 2 to 5% of the total amount of frauds. So what we have to be always careful is about the loan related frauds, though in the post-COVID scenario, I think cybersecurity frauds is an area where all of us have to be much more vigilant.
Mr. Sabnavis, your views on this?
No, actually, if you look at the sectors, I think the ones which were under stress earlier were also in the infrastructure space. I would say infrastructure and metals, I think textiles. These were the sectors which are under stress. And I don't think that picture is going to change significantly in this financial year, because we don't see these sectors showing a major turnaround. Yes, some things like steel and cement are likely to show a positive growth towards the end of the year. But in terms of their overall ability to get out of this stress, I think it will still take support. I think these are the sectors. I think on frauds, I think Subhashi has given you the answer. I don't think I can add anything more to it.
Thank you, sir.
Jani ji,
Yes, sir.
for all of you, and I'm thinking economist now, and me and Mr. Sabnavis are two economists, and you and Mr. Kalia are two bankers. Now, the question which has been raised by one of the participants just now, Mr. Tripathi, I think is a very pertinent question. Now, in case there is change of guard in America and the Democrats are back in power, what implications will it have for the banking sector and the financial sector? Now, my personal view as an economist is we have seen the Democrats in power earlier, and but then we saw that COVID is, like Mr. Kalia mentioned, a black swan event, once in 100 years. How will you be able to handle the fiscal situation in America, which is 20% of the world economy and has implications for rest of the world? Probably the packages which will come out will be far more liberal, like the quantitative easing, what happens to the interest rates, and what happens to the banking sector. Because at the end of the day, we are all highly interconnected. So I am myself thinking that what implication does this have for banking? I really like to hear the practitioners' views from both of you, and Mr. Madan Sabnavis, because he's the chief economist in a rating agency, maybe his outlook and strategy and analysis is different from mine.
So let me just convey my views on this matter. My personal view is, as Mr. Madan very aptly put it, that if Mr. Trump continues, there is going to be continuity of whatever policies he has, and there is going to be a lot of unpredictability. But one thing that I have observed about the Trump administration is that he is capable of coming out with any kind of policy approach on any matter at any point of time, depending upon the kind of situation he is placed in. But I am also of this view that if Biden comes into power, which is a likely scenario that is being projected by most of the channels, I personally believe that so far as trade ties are concerned, definitely it would be beneficial for country like India. Till today, we have not been able to have any, trade agreement with US, which is likely to something that is likely to happen. Yes, Biden administration is definitely going to have certain very strong views on matter of personal liberties and other political issues to which Mr. Madan was alluding, and that is going to be the scenario. Now coming as regards if Biden comes to the power, what would be the financial impact? I mean, recently what we are observing is a couple of things. Rupee is depreciating against US dollars in a significant manner. Why is it happening? We are all aware about the fact that our exports are not doing that well, particularly post-COVID. Though some kind of stimulus has been proposed by RBI in the latest monetary policy, but still our exports are not doing well. In fact, countries like, because we have come out with Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we just don't want to have that kind of, imports, and we want to go in for all import substitution. While it is a good and a noble idea, but I personally believe that we will have to come out with some kind of policy which would give impetus to exports. If we have to have that kind of, currency parity so far as US dollar is concerned, because rupee is continuously depreciating against US dollar, and if the trade ties improve and if we are having better relationship, I personally believe that the financial sector, particularly in terms of the exports and imports, things would be much better for the country, and it would have a positive impact because of the predictability of trade ties. And one more important thing is that this administration, Biden administration, would be much more predictable than the Trump administration for all sectors of the economy, whether it is financial or otherwise. So that would be a big positive. That's my personal view.
See, my views are that in case of Trump decide the policy and then call his advisors and say that we have decided this. While in case of Biden, he will have his own advisors. He will go by the advice given by him. He will go by the consensus, and then he will have a good policy which is good for the America. Definitely, he will try to have a good relation with the China. Instead of fighting with the China, he said, let us sit on the table and see that how we both country can benefit by doing the trade. And the same thing it will happen with the India also. Like many times Trump was threatening us, particularly that bike and Harlek bikes, you reduce the import duty, you do this, you do that, or H-1B visa and all that. So that sort of thing will not happen. Biden will, whatever decide, he will definitely take the advice of his advisors, and it will be a concerted view about the number of people which will be taking the decision, and it will be better for America. So I'm more hopeful that it will be, as far as the trade, business, banking is concerned, Biden will be able to do better job with the India also and with the China also.
Just to reiterate what I said, I think as far as the financial sector is concerned, I think there will be no impact irrespective of what happens. Because if you're actually looking at the difference between the two presidents, there could be something on immigration, there could be something on trade. I don't think it's gone beyond that in the past as far as India is concerned on the economic front. Whatever could be the positive, let's say, vibes which are there between the two countries at a political level, has not really translated into any economic benefits for India. I think we also had there were certain benefits being given under some under some old treaty. I think that was annulled by Donald Trump. I think we have to not get overawed by this thing, saying that something is going to turn out positively for India if it's Biden or this thing on the economic front. Globally, of course, I think the way in which presidents or two likely presidents look at the world economy is quite different. One is saying one is for America, the other one is more global. But only again to reiterate, are we actually in a position to leverage what are the chances, what were the opportunities which come if Biden comes to power and there's more free trade? I'm not quite sure about.
Thank you. So over to you, Professor Charan Singh ji.
Jani ji, thank you
Yes, sir.
for conducting the session. So
It was a pleasure.
thank you very much. Now I must thank all the panelists and the participants to have spent so much time today discussing this very pertinent issue. The last question also was very, very sensitive question and very pertinent question. COVID-19 has changed the outlook of many people. While we know the Democrats have been experiencing it, and to that extent, we know the style and strategy of Mr. Obama. We have also seen in the last 4 years the style and strategy of Mr. Trump. Being the largest economy in the world, accounting for nearly 20% of GDP, all other countries in the world, which are highly interconnected, have spillovers, and trade and finance are important ingredients of this spillover and interconnectedness. Even the continent travels these days extensively. America does provide economic leadership to the world. Both the World Bank and the IMF are sitting in Washington and certainly get some influence by who the president is. In these very uncertain times, we will have to charter our own course of action in days to come, as I understood from the last question that the panelists tried to answer. Absolutely policy oriented, and I think we will have to stand our ground. There may be benefits in either way. This uncertainty we will know sooner than later, but we, as I understand, as a country, will have to make our own policies, be prepared for whatever the global situation is like, and take care that our financial system is strong and robust. It is in this context that the panelists spoke at length about the NPAs and the fraud, and in their own way gave us some ideas to address these important issues. I must thank the panelists for sharing their wisdom and experience with us, and I want to thank all the participants who have spent time with us. I would like to conclude by saying that next week we have Professor Hans Genberg, who will be speaking to us on central banking and COVID. And a week after that, we will have Dr. Prakash Lonjani, who will be speaking to us on income inequalities, requesting each one of you to spare time and join us at 5:30 next weekend and 5:30 week after. Thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.